Alrighty, so this is Social Studies World History 14 Standard, analyzing the age of revolutions, and we're going to begin with Substandard A, examine absolutism through a comparison of the reigns of Louis XIV and Tsar Peter the Great, and we're going to start by talking about the rise of monarchies in Europe. It really began as just a type of government across all of Europe, and some of these monarchs would improve the conditions of their nations. Others took advantage of the power, prompting revolts. And what we're going to specifically talk about is a little bit about Spain and France and Austria, and then, of course, Russia, and we'll even get a little bit to England. So the Spanish monarchs, you get Charles I of Spain, who inherited the Holy Roman Empire, which makes him now Charles V. He's the guy that, if you guys remember, that we talked about, who outlawed Martin Luther. So in 1550, he gives up his throne. Basically, the reason that he gives up his throne is because he just feels like it is just too much to not only rule Spain, but all of the Holy Roman Empire, and it's just too much for one person. So he gives up part of it to his brother Ferdinand, and he takes over the Holy Roman Empire. And then Charles's son, Philip II, he becomes the king of Spain. Philip II had an absolute rule, meaning that he wielded ultimate control over the government and its people, and he had the authority to lead an inquisition or hold trials for people accused of false religious beliefs, and he even removed many Protestants, Jews, and Muslims from Spain. If you guys remember, just by definition, Inquisition is an official investigation. After he tried to conquer England with his armada and lost, Spain's power just sort of kind of declines. Alrighty, so at this point, I guess we need to start talking about France. The absolute monarchs ruled in France also, and it is Henry IV who reigned peacefully first, and it was very peaceful between the Catholics and the Protestants, who were the Huguenots, even after his conversion to Catholicism. His son, so Henry IV dies, his son, and this is Henry IV of France, not to be confused with Henry of England, because, well, that could be a little confusing, I suppose. So he dies. Louis XIII, who was a boy at the time, I think he's like 4, he, obviously you can't let a 4-year-old run your kingdom, so Cardinal Richelieu and Louis's mother, Marie de Medici, so she's a Medici from Italy, if you guys remember us talking about the Medicis a little bit last term. She rules as the regent. Cardinal Richelieu helps them out and kind of keep things in order. They start building relations with the Protestant governments and let the Huguenots keep their religious rights, but he took away their political and military rights to prevent them from growing too powerful. He's paranoid about losing power, so Richelieu sets up a network of spies to uncover secret plots by these nobles who are a little discontented, and he would basically just execute any conspirators. If you guys have probably seen the movies, the Three Musketeers, this is that time period. that we're specifically talking about within this lecture. So Louis XIII dies, and now we are seeing his son, who is also like 4 years old, in 1643, Louis XIV, he inherits the throne, and his chief minister, who is now Cardinal Mazarin, Mazarin, he takes control of the government. Now, Richelieu has been grooming this particular cardinal, and so Mazarin, he crushes any opposition from nobles. Louis, in 1661, assumes the power over the government because, he's old enough now to rule on his own. He becomes the absolute monarch over half of a century. He is fearful because of threats against his life, and any kind of rebellion and stuff. He kind of remembers this stuff. So what he wants to do is he wants to consolidate the power over the state. And the three groups that actually threaten him are the commoners of France, because of their rioting, the Catholic clergy, and even the landed nobility. So in order to basically to deal with any of this, he simply just moves his court. It's like 12 miles outside of Paris, and it's this estate that is called Versailles. And I believe that if I have these in the right order, there it is. That's the Palace of Versailles. And let me make myself go away here for a second, and you guys can see that picture a little better. Alrighty, so that's Versailles. And I can tell you from going there myself personally, it is huge and absolutely gorgeous. It is just beautiful. Very ornate, very large, and it is the building of this large manor that really adds to part of Louis's problems because he spends so much money. It's a very elaborate and decadent royal court at Versailles. Now, what he does is basically when he moves here, he makes it where every decision has to be approved by him. He basically at this point now has complete power over not only his people, but foreign policy, the church, taxes. He calls himself the Sun King. To get the loyalty of the Catholic Church, what he does is he actually will, if you guys remember, we talked a little bit about last time about the Edict of Nantes. He actually repeals this 87-year-old, at this point is an 87-year-old decree of religious tolerance that allows Protestants to worship freely. By repealing this, the Protestants start leaving France. This hurts the economy, but it does please the Catholic leadership. So this leaves now just the nobility, and because he calls himself the Sun King, this is where he says, hey, I'm the Sun King. It's the divine right of all kings. If you rebel against me, you're rebelling against God. Um, Not only did he, think of himself as this, divine right king, but what he did is, in order to kind of keep everybody in place, he implemented kind of different strategies to deal with the nobility. Says, hey, you fight against me, you're fighting against God. But to kind of keep them in place, to even keep them from doing that, he had, basically, he strips a lot of the nobility of their power. Now, what he does is he uses commoners, which he calls intendants, and he makes it easier to control them because they were commoners, and now they have power that they owe to Louis's generosity, and he can and does just dismiss them, arrest them, execute them at will. These are the people that he has to collect taxes, administer any kind of justice that needs to be administered, I guess, at his will, and they become his king's council. He also pressures the nobility to live at the palace, and this is why Versailles is so large. So again, here it is one more time. This is why the palace at Versailles is just so large, because he makes them live there. It could actually house up to 10,000 people. They would have these large, lavish banquets, dances. They would play games. And he was all the time trying to keep the nobility so busy that they just really couldn't cause any problems. He basically tries to convert the Huguenots to Catholicism, and those he didn't, they flee to England and Germany, and all of this is to basically get away from, I hate to say the craziness of Louis, but his absolute rule is just, keeping them under his thumb, if you will. So that's Louis in a nutshell. I guess no pun intended. So the purpose of this is to examine absolutism through the comparison of the reign of Louis XIV and Tsar Peter the Great. Russian monarchs were called Tsars, and this derived from the term Caesar, and it is spelled C-Z-A-R. Peter I rules from 1682 to 1725, and he loves Western Europe. Russia it's a feudal society up until this point. Peter is very, very, very fascinated with Western Europe. He wants to adopt their customs. He is young when he comes to power. Now, the difference in between Louis and Peter, who will eventually will be known as Peter the Great, Louis's country is already established. It's very wealthy. They have powerful, it's one of the most powerful countries in Europe, in all honesty. It has a very modern navy, an army. Russia was, again, it was just you got just this feudal society and this small community of Dutch and German merchants in Moscow with this one single port that's frozen most of the year. They have a large and powerful landed nobility known as the Boers, and that's spelled Boyars, one of your vocabulary words that you were supposed to look up. This was mostly a dependent serfdom society where, the serfs were doing all the labor. Like Louis, Peter's power was threatened by the nobility, the church clergy. In this case, it's the Eastern Orthodox instead of the Roman Catholic. Unlike Louis, and I apologize for the hiccup there. There was a thing going on my computer, so I apologize about that. So unlike Louis, Peter faced the challenge of geographic isolation, and he needed to modernize technology, politically, and even economically. So what he did is he went on what would be called a Western tour. And he actually went in disguise, so he takes over power in 1696, and then he sets off on this grand tour in 1697, and he goes all over Europe traveling in disguise. He studies the military, political structures, the economy, cultures of these European states. He comes back to Russia, and he starts instituting all these series of reforms to modernize and westernize Russia. So this is the westernization of Russia. And this helps him consolidate the power. This modernization, westernization of Russia, Russian society, he establishes newspaper. He elevates the status of the Russian nobleman. He actually almost institutes this tie to serfdom so that it gives the nobility a little more power. He orders the Boers to wear European-style dress, to shave their traditional beards. If they don't shave their beards, they're taxed. And so that's just, he does these different little things to kind of, again, kind of like Louis, put them under his thumb. He starts building a strong navy. He enlarges Russia. He establishes schools for navigation, so this helps with his navy. Arts and science. He gets people from, different places in Europe to come help and train in these facilities. He does like Louis, and he actually removes nobility from the government positions and replaces them with the intendants drawn from the commoners. Most of the powerful families, the noble powerful families, are removed from his government and council advisors and place them with men from lesser families. He rewards these new appointees with generous land grants, and so now they have this almost fealty to him that adds more to his respect. He deals with the Orthodox Church by abolishing the position of the Patriarch, which is the traditional head of the church, and replaces it with a Holy Synod, which is a group of people who now is under his direct control. So he's got power firmly in his hands, and he starts modernizing Russia with an army. He builds up a large navy, and he takes over territory from Sweden, and this is where he ends up gaining a foothold in St. Petersburg. And he builds this just, and to that point, a very modern city, one of the more modern cities, this great port, this city, which now will be the new, what he calls window on Europe, this new modern capital there in St. Petersburg. And it's built in that Western Baroque style. And this now becomes his warm water port. So instead of having that one port that is frozen for like half the year, now he has this port that he can operate out of for the entire year. This one went a little longer than I meant for it to. We'll talk a little bit more about people like, Maria Theresa from the Austrian Empire, and how it leads into some other things. But so this is our little comparison, and I say little, but it's like 20 minutes long. I would say watch this in probably in pieces or whatever. I would not try to, but now that I'm at the end, I guess I probably need to leave you notes at the beginning. So anyway, I hope this worked out for you. I hope you guys are enjoying it, mostly seeing me and talking. I am going to place some notes for you guys to just kind of maybe fill in or whatever. So, alrighty, thanks for watching.